That was my first real eye-opening experience that we are fighting a war. When you're seeing, uh, we're waiting for our next flight into Thailand. And of course, you know how it is in the military, hurry up and wait. You know, you get there and then you're given a, a manifest number and then you just wait to be called. So we spread our stuff out on the floor and sat back and waited. And Da Nang was a major hub. So you're seeing aircraft learn and land and fresh troops get off. You're seeing troops that were in country in the bush someplace getting back on. You're seeing ARVN soldiers come by. You're seeing ARVN soldiers come off. You're seeing civilian Vietnamese carrying stuff from somewhere on the base to a plane to be taken someplace else, or setting up their shops. You see the whole scenario going out in front of you, and that was really an experience. I really saw the difference between American soldiers who were fresh and the ones who were in the jungle and were true combat vets, and then the ARVN troops. There's a big, you could really spot all three of them very distinctly in how they wore their uniforms, the uniforms that they had, and especially their arms that they carried.
Yeah, how would you describe the difference between the new guys and the U.S. forces that had been there for a while and had been out in the boonies?
The easiest way were three things: their mannerisms. The new guys were always fidgety, moving around, you know, looking around. The older guys, I think the best expression would be laconic. The movements were very specific and only when necessary. They spoke to each other in practiced small conversations. They weren't loud. It was very, very, very soft. The uniforms that they wore, the new guys' uniforms had a shine to it. In some cases, even creased from being pressed. The boots were brand spanking new. They still wore their insignia of rank and their patches and all that. That when you go in country, that's the first thing you take off so that you don't become a target. And then the third thing was how they carried their weapons. The old troops, the combat troops, the weapon was a part of them. If they moved, the weapon moved with them. It didn't clunk. It didn't get put someplace, and then the guy quickly remembers to go and grab it. It was just a very noticeable part of them. The ARVN guys you knew because they were shorter. Their uniforms were mismatched. A little bit of the old style American uniform and the new ripstop camo type uniforms. Helmets that were too big, and arms that were mismatched. Everything from some of them had M16s, some of them had carbines, some of them had BARs from looked like World War II. Even a couple of them had the AR-15s. God knows where they got them. So there was that mismatch.
Yeah.
But that was the big difference between the Americans, though, was the uniforms, the way they behaved in their mannerism of speech and movement, and the way they held their weapons.
And it was watching that, just sort of seeing this play out in front of you, that really drove home to you the fact that this was a war zone. You could see it in the mannerisms of the guys who've been out in the field.
Oh yeah. For the first time, I realized that I was flying into a war. My job was to fly either side by side or back seat if it was the OV-10 to take photographs of specific targets or potential targets. The film was then carried over to another, either to ourselves if it was considered a very hot target, or if it was going to be a target that was going to be planned for down the road, it was taken to another base. The film was taken to another base where analysts evaluated the film and proscribed what they called a frag or fragmentary order that would have that target listed to a specific squadron to hit. And that squadron could be F4s, it could be AC-130s, It could be a whole variety of aircraft that would then go in and hit that potential target that I photographed. The other mission, flying the same O2 Skymaster, was propaganda slash psychological operations, where the aircraft would drop leaflets and play tapes circling around villages along the border between Thailand, Laos, and Cambodia. My job as the photographer was to photograph the village and villagers for anybody who looked new or out of place, anybody wearing a uniform, people that didn't seem to fit in, and also anything new that that village had, new structure that was pretty good sized, tracks on the ground that belonged to a wheeled vehicle when there shouldn't have been one, things of that order. And then my film was taken by somebody else. I'm not sure exactly who. I don't know whether it was the CIA. I don't know. I'm be speculating on that. But it was film that I shot, but I never processed, that I gave to somebody. And what happened to that, I don't know. The first phase of me being there was learning the ropes of and meeting the expectations of my bosses. Could I do the job? Was I a decent enough photographer? And if I'm going to be taking up a pilot's time flying in his back seat, am I going to do a good enough job? All these things I had to prove to my superiors. Once they realized I could handle myself, they put me up on the big board, on the mission board, and I became operational.
You write about, if I remember right, it's sort of one of these aircraft you're in circling around, right, and sort of gradually getting lower and lower to the place where you could get photographs of people's faces. And
yeah, that was the psychological operations missions. The pilot flew into a village or over a village, and at first he flew over and dropped the leaflets, and my job was to photograph as many of the faces as I could as they went after the leaflets. Leaflets are very popular, God knows for whatever reasons. The second part of the mission was to play a tape that was developed by the Thai, Lao, and American forces, to kind of buck up the villagers who are living on the border area, to keep them loyal to the Thai government. And my job was to, as we flew over them there, to photograph the faces and like I said earlier, anything that I thought didn't belong in that village. When we completed that, that's when we became feet wet, so to speak. We crossed the border, across the river into Lao ocean territory, and did the same thing on that side of the river with the Laotian villagers. But on that side, they were the bad guys, and that was the side that it wasn't uncommon to see little sparkles coming up from the villages that I remember when I first saw them. I remember pointing out to my to my pilot saying, "Hey, those are cool. What is that?" And he kind of looked at me and just shook his head. He said, that's them firing at us. What you're looking at is seeing the barrels of the rifles and seeing the muzzle flashes."
So that's over Laos where you're taking fire. Now, I'm interested in so you're dropping leaflets over Thai villages as well?
Yes, both Thai and Laotian. The Thai villager, that's why it had to have Thai approval for that. If you didn't have approval, you couldn't do it. You could fly over the villages and play a tape, saying, "Hi, how you doing? Make sure you guys are still loyal to the king." But unless you got the approval to do that, and the only time approval came, it was if there was some question about that village receiving cross river cross river traffic from villagers on the Laotian side. But most of the work where it was true propaganda stuff was on the Laotian, Cambodian side.
Well, was kind of the underpinning of this work in Thailand was the sort of domino theory thinking at work, that we want to
Very much so.
ensure that the dominoes dropping, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, Burma, India. We want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So the propaganda over the Thai villages, that was sort of
Very much so. You see that
preventative stuff.
you got to remember the only reason that the Americans were in Thailand was because Thailand, the Thai government was very afraid of what was going on in Laos and Cambodia regarding the fact that the Royal Lao government was taken over by the Pathet Lao. The Cambodian royal government was taken over by the Khmer Rouge. So Thailand was looking at what these guys were doing next, and they're going, well, you know, and there was a lot of incursions into the northern Thai Lao border areas when Thai villagers were being invaded. I don't know if Americans are aware of that, but there was a cross-border war going on between Thailand and Lao and the Khmer Lao long before we got operational in Laos.
So it sounds like, I'm sorry, it sounds like what, you know, because sometimes folks will just almost casually dismiss the domino theory. And of course, it doesn't play out, you know, in that there goes Burma, there goes India, now we're going into the Middle East or something like that. But it sounds like, you know, it was playing out maybe in a small way in the part of the war you were in. Do you agree with that or not?
I agree with that. See, and that didn't come home to me until I stopped flying and became the civic action photographer, when I actually started visiting the different border villages on the ground in a civil action mode. Thailand I really enjoyed my time in Thailand, and I really enjoyed the Thai people. But the Thai people were as concerned and as scared about what was going to happen to their country as we were about the whole concept of communism. Many of the villages of northern Thailand were not of pure Thai origin. They were more Lao Thai or Cambo Thai or even Vietnamese Thai villages with practices, belief systems, ethnicity, the whole 9 yards, going towards Lao, Vietnam, and Cambodia. And so there was always a question of loyalty. Some of these villages had mixed loyalties, you know, because they had relatives both in Laos and in Thailand. And the Thai government was very much aware of that. So when Laos fell and Cambodia fell, there was a very, very deep and, in my estimation, honest concern that it wouldn't take long for the communist governments of Laos and Cambodia to ferment and some kind of a situation on the border regions of Thailand and exacerbate it and even develop it into something more complex. And so that's why they allowed our bases to go in there. That and the fact that the Thai government has had its own problems with its ethnic minorities, problems of that they didn't take them seriously enough, didn't give them the same benefits as the Bangkok Thais. And so there was a reason to believe that there could be some kind of a situation that they would not want to happen. And yeah, so they began to, they were in some ways forced. In many ways, they quickly came to realize that if they were to keep their country whole, they would have to do something about those border villages. And I'm glad to say that their concept of using civic action as a primary means of that, I think really paid off.